and welcome to Photography with Imre, and that would be me. And this is episode 11. We're going to be talking about these things. Yeah, square dark filters. They're basically the neutral density filter, but they're really useful. And they come in various sizes. This is a P series, Koken, that's the type that I use. And these, of course, come in various brands. Some are like the screw-in type. Some are the square variety like this one here, and then as you can see I can push it up and down in the holder. And they're basically either plastic or glass, and depends on basically your budget, how much you want to spend. You can get various qualities and again different sizes for them. Some require holders. I'm going to flip this around here a little bit. And I'll give you a close-up shot so you can see this holder here. Basically just a ring, and then that screws onto your lens, and then of course you have the plastic part that basically holds the filter in place.
Neutral density filters also come in various shades or optical densities, which are measured in several different ways, such as attenuation, the filter's optical density, reduction of light given in f-stops, and even percentage of light transmission. But most commonly you'll see the attenuation, optical density, and f-stop values listed, with the last being the easiest for us photographers to swallow. Here's a table of common values and how each relates to the other. The neutral density filter I have in this video is an ND 8, usually the darkest one that most photographers will use. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the number after the letters ND corresponds to the attenuation of the filter.
Now before moving on to how you can actually use these filters, one last thing I'd like to touch upon is that some might have a color cast. Not all are just a neutral gray. So your color on your image may be a little bit affected. For example, some are just a bit magenta or a little bit brown, and you may get a little bit of color cast. So a couple of tips for you. One, you can either fix it in Photoshop, for example, or if you have whatever image editing program you use. And also you can force your white balance on your camera to a specific setting. So for example, if it's sunny outside, obviously use a sunny setting. And or if you shoot in RAW, nice part is then you can set it later, and that might help a little bit too.
Alright, so what can neutral density filters do for us? Well, most commonly there are three primary applications, and I'll start with how they can help photographers achieve slower shutter speeds when it might not normally be possible or very easy to do. For example, let's say you want to shoot a waterfall, but it's really bright and sunny outside, and instead of freezing the action, you want to get that silky effect on the water. Now, because there's a lot of light, even stopping down your lens to a tiny aperture may still result in shutter speeds that are too fast to get that silky look. So here's a case where you can attach a neutral density filter, which will further reduce the amount of light entering your lens, thus allowing you to take a much longer exposure of your scene. This trick also works if you're taking shots of lightning during the daytime, and for other interesting uses that I actually found on the web. Check out my blog for more info. Another popular reason to use ND filters is to create a shallower depth of field. Using another example, you might want to shoot a subject using a larger aperture to get a tiny depth of field, which could make the photo more aesthetically pleasing. But maybe it's too bright outside and using a large aperture is not possible, as the shutter speed required exceeds the camera's capability. So once again, an ND filter can be attached to reduce the amount of light entering the lens, and now you can shoot wide open, getting that tiny depth of field. Here are a couple of sample images I created to demonstrate this, and being indoors I really could have done without the filter, but nonetheless the example still works. In this first image without the ND filter, take a look at the aperture and shutter speed values as well as those light stands in the background. Now examine this second image with the ND filter on the lens. Notice that the shutter speed is identical, the aperture is much wider open, and the depth of field is indeed smaller. The light stands are now more blurry too. If this was outdoors with greater distances involved, the effect would be even more apparent. Now there is another use for ND filters, but this generally applies to some point-and-shoot and older digital SLR cameras that may be limited in regard to shutter speed and aperture settings. In cases like this, using an ND filter to simply reduce the amount of light entering the lens may allow the camera to take a proper exposure by allowing the use of shutter speeds within the camera's capabilities. But since this is not much of an issue these days, I've discussed this a little further in my supplemental blog post. Oh, and let's not forget about graduated neutral density filters, but they deserve an episode of their own. And frankly, I'd like to go on a road trip into the Rockies to demonstrate this. So subscribe and become a fan on my page on Facebook to stay tuned.
Alright, thanks for watching, and hope you found that episode interesting and useful. As usual, check out my blog because I do have more information, some links about using neutral density filters, as well as remember to subscribe so you can stay up to date with my videos. And Binary Graphite also has a page on Facebook, so you can become a fan there. And I usually write little tidbits that I don't in my blog, so you can check that out for sure. And I certainly hope to see you next time. Take care.